Hello and welcome to the deeper dive for Reconnecting. This year we're going to do these videos and these sessions a little differently. I recognized last year that the groups did exactly what they were told to do, which is they watched the deeper dive video and then they discussed the deeper dive video. So what I discovered is that it might have been a little better if the groups discussed the actual homily. The deeper dives were good, but there were a lot of information. Between the homily, between the videos, there was just like a lack of focus. You could hear the homily and have some good thoughts and reflections, but then there would be this whole new talk to try to digest. It was just a lot. So this year, we're going to do things a little differently. The deeper dive will be the homily or parts of the homily, and then I'll provide and intersperse a little extra commentary on certain parts. And maybe if you're really nice and if you're real lucky, even a video clip or two of stuff that I reference. So we'll see. Why? Why do we do this? Because the homilies are really at the core of what it is that we're doing. When you hear the homily on Sunday and have a chance to think about and reflect on that, I want you to share that with each other. So yeah, long story short, I want you to use these videos to assist your dive into the homily. Jog your memory about what was said, clarify, deepen some points, but truly help us to take a deeper dive into the material of the homily. If you're watching this as a small group, you should have already taken a moment or two to begin with those two simple conversations, and then a time of prayer and reflection on the passage from Luke, that well-known story of Martha and Mary. If you skipped that, maybe you should pause the video and just go back and do that. But I'm sure you did it though. I'm sure you did it. So let's dive in. As you remember, I started off on Sunday by talking about those three recent experiences of disconnection: the water main breaking, the electricity going off, and the internet going down. And we use those experiences to think about, and we can use them to help us think about and feel out our own connection with God.
Burned into my brain too. Okay, so it's these experiences of disconnection. Okay, that's what we're getting at. These experiences of taking something absolutely for granted. Here's this connection in our life. Here's something just flowing into our lives. We hardly even notice it, barely notice it day to day until it's not there. It's when we realize that it's not there, then we realize just how absolutely essential it was to our life. Water, electricity, the internet. We just expect it to be there. But once it's gone, we realize, oh man, life really gets out of balance once those things are gone. We realize how our lives don't really function without those connections. We recognize that nothing else in life, especially when the internet goes down, but nothing else in life is important until we can reestablish those connections, get that fixed. Until we start talking about God. And then it's just like, all bets are off, and we're talking about a completely different thing that doesn't even count, apparently. So on your sheet, if you grabbed a sheet as you walked in, I know I love my handouts, but like if you grabbed one as you walked in, it's okay if you didn't. You're going to survive today, don't worry. On the back of it, under the notes section, there's a simple question. Okay, and I want us to think about this question as we begin, because it's the question. The question is, how connected do I feel to God? So I want us to just zone in on ourselves real quick. Take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Just kind of tune into your own body, tune into your own mind. It's going to be okay. And then just honestly ask yourself the question. I'm serious. Honestly ask yourself the question, how connected do I feel to God? Just take us just in through the nose, out through the mouth. How connected do I feel to God? And just allow the honest answer to come to your mind. Okay? No shame. Just ask yourself. Because for some of us, maybe the answer is, I don't know. Cool. Just be honest. For some of us, the answer is, Father, I feel very connected to God. Cool beans. Great. Just be honest. One guy over at Bushton this morning said when we asked this question, he's like, Father, the answer that I got was, I feel like I'm connected, but it's like a really long extension cord, and I think it should be a lot shorter. I'm like, cool, great, that's very honest, thank you. If you asked me, when I was like in high school and college, the answer I would have given you is, well, my family prays the rosary every day together, and we go to Mass every Sunday. It was like, I didn't ask what Jesus things you do. I asked, how do you feel? Like, how does this connection with God feel? How connected do you feel to God? Because, this is one of those simple but essential questions. Think of the examples again. When we're not connected to water, or we're not connected to electricity or the internet, we feel that sucker immediately. It's just like, boom, what happened? We immediately feel it. But then we get to this question of, well, do we feel that in our connection with God? Do we feel that sort of are we as aware, are we as attentive, are we as perceptive when it comes to our connection with God? And this is the big one. If and when I lose my connection with God, am I as frantic to get that back as when I lost the internet or electricity or water? Is my connection with God something as essential to my life as my utilities? It's because of questions like these, because of these experiences we have in our day-to-day life. That's why we've put together this year, instead of rerouting, it's reconnecting. Right? This 10-week series we start today as we go towards Easter about that connection that we have with God. Why? It's because that question of our connection with God drives at something central and essential to our life of faith, which is our relationship with God. I feel like sometimes I just stand up here and repeat myself, but I'll repeat it again. The reason that we show up here isn't so that I can try to convince you that God exists. The reason that we show up here isn't because we have to, because it's the church teaching that we have to go to Mass on Sundays. The reason that we show up here isn't for I hope it's not any of those reasons, as good as those things can be. The reason that we show up here, and what the church teaches us, is that none of those other things even matter unless we are first in a vital and personal relationship with the living and true God. And that relationship is called prayer. Okay, none of it matters unless we're first in a vital and personal relationship with the living and true God. I stole that from the Catechism. That's not my cool insight. That's just like basic church teaching. None of the other things matter. Our beliefs, our rules, the morality, none of it really even matters unless the first brick, the first thing we have to have established. Am I in this vital and personal relationship with the living and true God? The objection that I get is, well, Father, I just don't really think God's listening to me. I don't really feel his presence. He doesn't seem to care. And again, this is great. Be honest. Please be very, very honest. Because if you have an experience like that, you're in very good company. There was this guy in the history of the church. His name was Augustine. He had the exact same experience. He's now Saint Augustine, so you're in great company. But Augustine had that same experience of looking for this relationship, connection, whatever you want to call it, with God. For so long, decades of his life, he was looking for it. Until eventually one day it hit him like a ton of bricks. And then he wrote this. He said, he was talking to God. He said, late have I loved you, O beauty, ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside, and it was there that I searched for you. Okay, what's Augustine getting at? He says, late have I loved you. Not late have I believed that you exist. Late, have I obeyed your commandments. None of that. It's late have I loved you. Again, late have I been in this relationship with you. It took me a long time to get here, God. But he finally got that key brick. And then what did he say? Where was he looking for God all those decades? He says, what? Outside is that's where I was searching for you. So outside of himself. And he was outside of everything. He was looking for God. If you know Augustine's story, he was looking for God in his career, in his work, in money, in sex, the other things that you can imagine. That's where he was looking for it. And that's what he says, outside. That's where I was searching for you. But what does he realize? What hit him? You were within. That's where you were you were within.
So this week, I spent significant time focusing our attention on the theme of feeling disconnected from God, which is a common experience. It's a common experience and not one we should feel ashamed of. Some of the greatest saints in the history of the church have felt this. St. Augustine is our classic example here. Right? He was searching for decades. But here's the thing. Just because it's a common experience doesn't mean that it's a bad experience. It just is what it is. I think of the wise counsel that Gandalf gave to Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. Frodo's all, melancholic, and he's very moody and wishing things were different, wishing nothing bad had ever happened. And Gandalf points out something very important to him.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time or the circumstances that's given to us. In other words, the question isn't a question of good or bad, it's just, what am I going to do now? So take some time with your small group, discuss the questions. What is your experience of your connection with God? Do you experience one? How would you describe your connection? And what leaves you feeling disconnected or maybe just not as connected as you might hope?
Finally got, have we ever seen the movie Silence of the Lambs? This is not a kid's movie. Don't show your kids this movie. Okay, I'm going to caveat this one real quick. There's this beautiful scene in there. It's a dark movie, but it's brilliantly insightful. But there's this scene in there where one of the protagonists, Hannibal Lecter, he's talking to the FBI agent, trying to help her figure out, who the serial killer is and all this sort of stuff. Great. But he asks her that question, what is it that's motivating this killer? He's trying to get her to see it. And she's guessing all these things, it's his anger, it's his need for acceptance, his frustration. And Hannibal points out to her, no, that's not what's going on. What's going on? This guy's doing all these things because
he covets. That is his nature. And how do we begin to covet, Clarice? Do we seek out things to covet? Make an effort to answer now.
No. We just...
Now, we begin by coveting what we see every day. Don't you feel eyes moving over your body, Clarice? And don't your eyes seek out the things you want?
It's a weird example, I know, but it gets at the point that so much of our attention, so much of what drives us in the weirdest places is just where our attention has been placed. Why do you think advertisements work the way that advertisements do? Did you know your phone's designed to get you to look at it a lot? It's literally designed to get you to look at it. It's like where we focus our attention is where our attention is. I know that sounds like stupid, but where our attention is, that's where our attention is.
That which gets your attention gets your attention. So one thing that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks is why prayer, true prayer, is so difficult. But just to get you ahead of the game, one of the biggest reasons why our relationship with God is strained and why our prayer is strained is because our attention is pulled in 100 different directions. I mean, two of the deadliest and the sneakiest weapons of the devil today are overwhelming schedules and media overload. So busyness and our screens. Both attack the very core of our relationships with ourselves, with our family, with society, and with God. Why? Because it pulls our attention away from that which is necessary, the one thing necessary. What gets your attention gets your attention.
And for Augustine, for so much of his life, he placed his attention anywhere that his attention was drawn. And he never took the time to recognize and to realize God was just sitting there waiting for him the whole time. God was within, just simply waiting for him. The God, the creator of the stars, all of it, we don't have to attract his attention. We don't have to figure out clever ways to get God to notice us. There's not a magic formula to our prayers so that God will finally be able to hear us. God's just waiting for us. He's waiting for us to tune in, to reconnect. Augustine, in another book that he wrote, he says, God is interior intimo meo. It's Latin. He says, God is closer to me than I am to myself. That's how close God is to us. The church says the heart is the place of encounter with God. If you want to go find God, you don't need to go climb the mountains. He's just waiting, just simply waiting for us. So reconnecting these 10 weeks, it's not going to be me like giving you for 10 weeks, teaching you magical formulas and super cool techniques to get in touch with God. Like that's not going to get you dialed into God or something. That's not what we're doing these 10 weeks. That's not what it's going to take. Reconnecting is 10 weeks of discovering, of attending to, of becoming much more perceptive, of learning to pay attention, of reconnecting with the God who's simply sitting there waiting for us already. We just have to take our attention off of the things we always give it to and place it once again on God. The goal of this all then, it's summed up in one of my favorite stories. It's from the Desert Fathers. Right? So the younger monk goes to the older monk, and he's like, I think I'm missing something, man. You got to help me out, because I'm doing all my prayers, I'm fasting, I'm doing my meditations, I'm doing the stuff I'm supposed to do, but it's not clicking. Something's off. That's us. We're like, I'm trying here, but something's still off. And then the older monk just looks at him, does this, and fire starts coming out of his hands. And he says, if you wish it, you could be utterly changed into fire. The point of this story is not we can get fire powers at the end of this. The point of this story is we could be utterly changed, utterly transformed. Like this flame of divine love, God's very life can utterly transform us. Like I know you don't hear all the prayers that I say at Mass, but like when I pour the wine and the water into the chalice, the prayer that the priest says is, by the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity. We're sharing in God's own divine life. That's a bonkers thing to think about. That's an utter transformation that happens, that humans can share in God's divinity. But that's what our faith is proposing to us, that we can be utterly, utterly changed. So if I were going to sum up, again, the goal of reconnecting, it would be this, that each one of us would make that commitment. If we haven't already, we would make that commitment to enter into that life-changing relationship. So in other words, that each one of us would commit to a daily, sincere, and authentic commitment to this prayer of the heart, which we'll talk about what that is, but this real prayer of the heart. And that for those of us that already do that, that will be renewed and re-energized in that. Why? So that simply put, everybody can deepen their relationship with God, but then be utterly transformed, utterly changed by everything that God has for us. Okay, I'll call to close with this. We're all in search of God, like everybody is, even if they don't admit it. Every single person is in search of God. But the cool news is, God's already in search of us. C.S. Lewis said it right. He's on the move. And the cool news is, he's actually already found us. As Jesus says in the book of Revelation, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you would open, I would enter in. He's just waiting for us. Mother Teresa, she wrote this beautiful meditation based off that passage. She puts it on the lips of Jesus and she says, it's true. I stand at the door of your heart day and night. Even when you're not listening, even when you doubt that it might be me, I'm there, waiting for the smallest signal of your response, even the smallest suggestion of an invitation to permit me to enter, just anything. And I want you to know that whenever you invite me, I will come. Jesus is waiting at the door of our heart, just simply waiting. My hope, again, for myself, for you, for all of us these next 10 weeks, my hope is that we discover a renewed connection with God. My hope is that we hear that knock of the Lord at the door of our heart. My hope is that then every time, like when we come to the Eucharist, and we say those words that we just rattle off sometimes without remembering we say them, like, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof. I'm not worthy that you should enter into my house, enter into my heart. Lord, I'm not worthy. That will actually mean those. To truly invite the Lord in a real and powerful way, and that our lives will then be utterly transformed.
So that's it. Standing, waiting, knocking at the door of our heart is the Lord. Like Augustine says, we're outside looking for God and all these experiences of God in the strangest places, but what does the church point out to us? Man is in search of God, yeah, but God calls man first. The Catechism says this, we may forget our Creator or hide far from His face. We may run after idols or accuse God of having abandoned us, yet the living and true God tirelessly calls each person to that mysterious encounter known as prayer. In prayer, the faithful God's initiative of love always comes first. Our own first step is always a response. Okay, so God's just waiting calling out and waiting for a response, knocking and waiting for us to answer. And when we let him in, recognize him and allow him to do his work within us, that's when, as St. Paul says, he's able to do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. So just take a moment, share with each other what is stirred up within you as you hear those words from Jesus, from Mother Teresa. It's true, I stand at the door and knock. What does this stir up within you, and what are you hoping for as we move forward with reconnecting? I'll see you Sunday.